There was this huge unregulated industry where you had millions of Chinese students connecting with tutors either in the United States, other countries, or the Philippines at a time when US-China relationships weren't great, but you had all of these micro relationships happening. And it was an industry that wasn't getting so much attention, even though it was the largest part of ed tech, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I wanted to try and understand more about the lives of these teachers. They're sort of a modern gig worker. And just like Uber drivers are gig workers, these teachers are gig workers, no benefits. And there were hundreds of thousands of them. And I wanted to try and understand what their world was like, how they were connecting with students, and how they were influencing students' understanding of the world, and how were they starting to learn about China through their students and their students' families. Because I felt it was really important to have a positive story about US-China relations and relations between China and other countries based on human relationships, and I was curious to learn more. So I started just sort of studying about who these teachers were, how many they were. I started to watch their videos. There's a huge genre of online videos because these teachers made videos to try and help other teachers get hired. They ultimately made their earnings by either teaching students or by getting a referral fee by getting another teacher hired by a Chinese company.
Could you tell us how long does it take to make this documentary, and also where did you travel to film the story?
This whole project has taken about 3 years between the research, trying to identify subjects, doing the filming, and following the subjects. In my case, one of my subjects is in Indiana, one is a digital nomad in Bangkok, Thailand, and 2 live in the Philippines. So I needed to be able to negotiate access for these subjects to be willing to be in the film, and then get to know them, build trust, and then follow them. So for me, my traveling's been primarily in the US for the film because of COVID. So I found young filmmakers to partner with, both in the Philippines and in Thailand, to do the actual filming of the subjects, and I directed by Zoom.
Chinese families spend nearly 10% of the family income on children's education. How would you compare it with the US?
Education's a huge priority for Chinese families, and when it was a one-child policy, both parents were supporting that one child, grandparents were supporting that child, and they were prioritizing investment in education in a way that's very different from many other countries, including the United States. So Chinese families, on average, spent and do spend more on education than, say, American families, hoping that education becomes a gateway to higher education and to graduate studies and learning English and provides opportunities.
Was English learning one of the main focus for Chinese parents while investing their children among other STEM subjects?
Yeah, so Chinese families invest in a lot of extra tutorials, for their children, whether it's after-school programs or extra types of materials. I think English is one of the larger parts of the ed tech industry in terms of online tutoring. It attracted a lot of companies that specialty became delivering English either in physical centers in China or by providing an opportunity for Chinese families to connect to tutors outside of China. You guys are everywhere in China.
You guys are the rock stars of China. Congratulations.
Like VIP Kids and others, they created the technology.
We have over 100 gigabyte of data, audio, video.
What are the purpose for Chinese parents to invest their children learning English?
Well, English is one of the subjects that traditionally has been part of high-stakes testing in terms of being able to be successful in getting to a quality high school program or a quality college program. So parents have been interested in English as well as other subjects, knowing that that becomes a gateway for more options in higher ed. For families with resources, it also becomes a gateway for thinking about whether their child studies overseas. So there's some families who can afford to send their children for high school to other countries, and English becomes a key ticket for being able to do a program overseas. But that's a very elite group of people.
There are some very interesting English tutors in your documentary. Could you tell us, how does the online tutoring industry in China begin to peak
there was huge demand. Like many parents wanted to be able to have English teachers, and the industry that developed was able to be pretty sophisticated in offering different products. Some were more expensive and some were cheaper. So for example, if you have a tutor from the Philippines, the tutor is paid less, which also means the family has to pay less.
I've been a ESL tutor with 5-1 Talk for almost 3 years now. It's really hard for me to take care of my kids and at the same time earn money. Kids, hi!
A tutor from the United States who's paid more, who's doing private tutoring, is a more expensive tutor for a Chinese family to get. If a Chinese family wants to be in a group class with an American teacher, that's cheaper than a private class with an individual teacher. So the market became pretty sophisticated with a lot of different companies offering different products at different price points, which appealed to the Chinese market because there were some people who could afford a private American tutor and other people could spend less and be in a group class with a Filipino tutor, for example.
Do Chinese students and parents have a preference when it comes to the accent of English tutoring?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So there's a lot of misperceptions of like who is the best American teacher. So some families want to have a teacher that's blonde and blue-eyed and American. And if they end up getting a teacher who is American but happens not to be blonde and blue-eyed, sometimes they could be disappointed. So there's a lot of stories on the internet of what it was like to be a teacher if you were Asian American, or if you were Latino, or if you were African American, and what it was like to try and get students in China. Some companies let families pick their teachers. Some companies had parents and children selecting their teacher, and other companies organized classes providing the teacher with the family not having a choice. Many of the companies that gave families a choice were very popular because it meant that families could choose and shop all of these introductions from different teachers and pick the teacher that they felt was good. Did they want a male teacher? Did they want a female teacher? Did they want a teacher from New York or a teacher from California? So there was this genre of short videos that were made by teachers all trying to sell themselves to their Chinese audience to try and get hired. And it is, one of the characters, Lexi, tells a story about a student and mother asking her, "Are you really American? Your eyes are brown, your nose is big, are you American?" And she was like at first insulted because of course she's American. She lives in Indiana. She was born in the United States. Her parents were born in the United States. So there's a lot of learning that took place between families, children, and who their teachers were.
During the peak of English online tutoring in China, how was the skill?
So at its peak, it's hard to know the exact numbers, but there were at least 100,000 teachers in the United States doing this gig work. And some estimate that it was closer to 200,000. And in the Philippines, there were at least 20,000, and some estimated as high as 40,000. So there were a large number of teachers who were involved in this economy where they were paid by the class. Most classes were 25 minutes. So in an hour, a Filipino teacher would make about $2.90, and a US teacher would make between $18 and $25, depending on the company that they worked for.
Despite the double reduction policy, there's a large amount of children and families in China that still want English to be a part of their education with foreign teachers.
The companies in China also employed millions of employees who were supporting this industry or operating after-school centers in China. So before the industry collapsed, you had hundreds of thousands of foreign teachers involved. You had millions of Chinese employees working for these companies, and you had millions of students who were having class with foreign teachers, probably at least 4 million students. And then government regulations came and everything changed.
How do you think about the government policy?
So the double reduction policy, Some of the reasons for it are interesting, and there's different reasons. Were Chinese kids working too hard? Probably. Young children got a lot of homework from school. The new policy says that young children shouldn't get any homework, and then slightly older students in primary grades should have no more than an hour. That's not a bad thing, right? Making it so that kids can have a balanced life, enjoy play, not have to work too hard. The policy had other aspects, which was, for example, that there shouldn't be any private providers of tutoring services, and there shouldn't be any publicly listed companies related to this industry, and very quickly shut down the industry of the tutors. I think that was unfortunate because there were many meaningful relationships between students and their teachers.
And what's happening here, because Chinese media reporting a crackdown.
All private tutoring firms now must register as NGOs. They're banned from raising funds from the stock markets and from foreign investment.
And not just the students, because often their parents, their mother, their father, their uncle, their grandparents also got to know their foreign teacher. And the foreign teacher's children, in some cases, got to know the students in China. And the policy really represented a closing of the door to learning English with foreign teachers. And I think that's an unfortunate consequence of the policy.
In your documentary, you have mentioned that some tutors from the United States, they have to do classes either very early in the morning or around midnight. And also some Chinese students, they might have some burdens for the after school studies. So could you summarize for us the benefits and downsides of the online tutoring?
For teachers, it was a hard job. They had to wake up really early in the morning to teach their students with the time difference, and they worked long hours to be able to have a livable income. The students in China, in part pushed by their parents, would be taking English also at strange times. They might take it in the evening, they might take it on the weekend. So one of the things the government of China wanted to do was regulate so that kids could be kids and weren't taking language courses or other courses on weekends or other times. That definitely changed the industry. It also meant that a lot of teachers who had a job no longer had a job.
One of the benefits probably is, as you mentioned, there is a people-to-people connection between the US and China. So from the seamless connection to decoupling, was Xi Jinping the one to be blamed?
In that period of countries really focusing on national pride, there's a question about what is the role of English in China. And it's clear that the current government has made it more difficult for students to learn English, whether it's through centers, whether it's through tutors, or even the regulations for private kindergartens, which make it difficult for private kindergartens to offer English. So I would say that the current government in China represents a real shift from a period of when China was really open with cultural exchange, students leaving, hosting other students, to a period that appears to be more closed.
Does learning English pose any threats to the CCP? One of the experts in your documentary have said that to speak English in American accent and act American way.
English gives one access to a world of ideas in the sense that you can access English press, and maybe the English press says something different about global issues than one's own local language press. It gives you access to other people who have different ideas and perspectives. For some people that might be threatening. But I think English is a tool to be able to create bridges to many different cultures, not just North America. That's important and valuable. And I think it would be sad if this is a time in China where it becomes more and more difficult to gain access to English.
In your opinion, would the CCP prefer Filipino English tutors over US English tutors?
So this is a really interesting question because the policy would suggest that pretty much the whole industry was regulated and should have been shut down. But the reality is that some of the companies that operate from the Philippines are still operating and doing pretty well. So it's almost as if the Chinese government looked towards those companies that focused on the US and North America and sort of didn't look as closely at what was happening with the Filipino market. And in keeping the relationship between the Filipino government and the Chinese government, these companies like 51 Talk continue to hire tutors, and they continue to be providing English instruction through their platform in China. So there is some double standard going on between what it seems to be continuing to tolerate or welcome access to Filipino tutors, but making it more difficult for North American tutors.
All classes starting on August 5th will be canceled from the system.
The teachers just woke up one morning to a completely cleared schedule.
GoGo Kid decided to close literally
I hope the
overnight.
film will be able to be seen in China. I really hope that it can give Chinese viewers some insights into the life of the American teachers and foreign teachers in the Philippines, so that it also promotes viewers gaining a greater perspective of the world. One of the things that documentary films do is allow people into people's homes to tell us compelling story that allow people to both intellectually and emotionally connect with the subjects and the topic.